Well, I wandered off, leaving Plymouth Police to listen to this drivel, and unbeknownst to me, the two Antifa cretins had given up their tannoy disruption and decided to do something a bit more physical. Nobody knows if it was the cameras they wanted to damage or Carl and his team. Either way, they pushed their way through the people watching, got to the front, and as they got close to one of the cameras, Reverend Simon confronted them to stop them breaking into the circle and getting near the equipment. They held some abuse, all part of the course, but then one of them spat straight in Simon's face. I only saw that later by seeing the footage on someone's phone. All I saw live was Simon pushing the two of them back out of the circle and trying to grab hold of the one who spat at him. A perfectly legal thing to do, by the way, detaining someone who just assaulted you.
You don't just know what you're doing here. Look at them beating that guy up. Look at him getting his hands out. I'm waiting for you. I'll go back in. Let's go back in. Right. We'll have to let you go under breach of the peace again.
Before I talk about the way the police handled this, I just want to point out 2 points about this clip. Firstly, who looks like the violent one here? Simon is out in the open. He's in a public place. He's working, and he knows he's on camera all day and representing Carl Benjamin, at least to some extent. When he pushed those 2 idiots back out of the group, look at the body language. I could see this live at the time, and so could the coppers who were all around me, seeing the very same stuff I was, with better trained eyes, I might add. Look at Simon's hands. Both are outstretched and open. That, as the police know only too well, because it's in their training, is a visible show of passivity or self-defence. Police officers are trained to use open-handed techniques whenever they can. Close your fist and punch someone, it looks fucking awful. It looks like you're beating someone up when you might actually be defending yourself. Whereas with open hands, a palm in the face, for instance, it looks so much more defensive. And it's I won't say it's not abused, because it might be by some, but generally it's not. But the truth is, if you're a police officer and you're standing somewhere and someone's giving you some shit or whatever and it kicks off and you punch them in the face but with the palm of your hand, most eyewitnesses to that incident will think that was a defensive strike. Whereas you close that fist and most witnesses all of a sudden flick the other way and say he was punching him. It's a really important point. I don't think Simon's got a clue about this. This is just genuine defensive behaviour from Simon. But this is why the police learn to do this, because this is how people naturally behave when they are being defensive, when they're being attacked. And so the police learn about this. They learn about the psychology of how it looks to other people, how it affects their witness statements, how it affects the police in court. They do this stuff for a living. They know this stuff inside out. Simon doesn't. Simon has just been spat at in the face. He's angry. Who wouldn't be? But he is trying to get hold of this guy and protect himself at the same time. All the way through this clip, no matter how many, you can slow it down frame by frame, Simon's hands stay open and outstretched because he's protecting himself and trying to grab hold of this man to detain him. On the other hand, look at the other man's body language. Goading smirk on his face, enjoying every minute of what's going on, fists clenched. Now he could, and he probably would because he's a devious Antifa prick, he could claim that his fists are clenched because he's defending himself from Simon. But it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, not with this footage, because firstly Simon has open hands, so he's not trying to assault this man, clearly. You don't assault people very well with the soft palm of your hand, unless you're trained to do that and he's not a police officer. Secondly, and most importantly, this man is clear to run. And this is a really important legal principle. If you're cornered, you can behave a lot more violently than you can when you have room to run away from whatever you claim was the threat to you. Again, police officers know this stuff inside out, and barristers and lawyers know this stuff inside out, and it's what gets a lot of people off charges of serious assaults when they were actually defending themselves, such as domestic violence. If you're trapped in the kitchen, you might have to use a knife to save your life. Whereas if you're in the garden, you could hop the fence and fucking leg it. It's an important point, and it makes sense. He could be running away at this point, this guy. He could just turn and go. But he isn't, is he? Simon, on the other hand, was confined all day and has nowhere to run as he's tied up by his equipment, his job and his boss. He's got to be there. Of course, none of that takes into account the fact that Simon was actually trying to grab hold of a man who had just spat at him in the face. A particularly nasty type of assault, which is often mistaken for something less serious than it is. Police have arrested people for attempted murder when people spat at them in the face. For example, one case where a prostitute with HIV and hepatitis C, I think, spat in the officer's face, arresting officer's face, deliberately, to try and infect him with deadly diseases. Yeah, now you know why you don't spit at a copper. It's not a laughing matter, and they'll show you how funny it is if you ever try it, but I don't recommend it. The second point I'm going to comment on is that absolute shithead socialist scumbag who tried to leverage this opportunity into a bleating scream of victimhood. Look at him assaulting him, look at him, officer.
Look at him beating that guy up, look at him getting his hands up.
This is such a devious trick because, and I think he knew this, when something is kicking off like this and police are all around, the one who screams loudest is often believed out of hand. It's not always the police's fault either. It's not necessarily bias, it's just, it has an automatic psychological effect on anyone hearing those claims or those screams. Their eyes can start to play tricks on them, thinking they're seeing whatever the person is screaming about instead of just actually seeing what they're seeing. This stuff's been studied in America in police shootouts. You know, what they saw, they filmed events and then asked them to recount it later, and officers' accounts were just way off the mark, and they were influenced by other stuff going on, like a woman screaming in the corner or something, or children screaming or whatever. This devious, spineless, socialist prick has used that little old chestnut, and I suspect he's had plenty of practice with it. He was just too good at it. It was too automatic for him, and it's about as low as you can get. You can even see the badly disguised smirk on his face as he's fucking doing it. And maybe it did influence the officers. Okay, so what has this officer seen? The officer is pretty much detaining Simon, and so far he's watched Simon all day. Trapped him by his van in a closed area with a brick wall behind, nowhere to go. Clearly working for Carl on the security for the event. He's also seen that Simon has not left that circle all day, except maybe for a quick trip to the toilet. He's also seen these two men, which all the police were watching most carefully all day beforehand. Him and his mate had been blasting sirens all day. They were the only people probably in the whole city that afternoon who were trying to disguise themselves. And that guy was the only person who shouted, "See you later," threateningly to Carl. Something which any officer worth his salt would never fail to pick up on. And this officer is worth his salt. He's a trainer with well over 20 years' experience, and he teaches new officers how to do the job. So on seeing Simon scuffling for the first time all day with the two antagonists that have been up to their antics all day, his response is to grab hold of Simon and threaten him with arrest. Now I'm going to try and be as fair as I can, because I spoke to this officer and he definitely knows what he's doing, and he was a nice enough bloke. But he's a police officer, and they are all influenced by this overtone of bias towards one way, and we know which way that is. So I'm going to try and look at this from his perspective first and give him the benefit of the doubt as much as I can. He sees a minor disorder and he needs to take action on it. Good, at least he is doing. That's one positive. We've been to Truro already. So he has to intervene, and he says to Simon, "I'll arrest you for a breach of the peace if it happens again." Okay, that is understandable, almost. It would be a lot more understandable if he had first asked Simon what had just happened. But he didn't do that. He just physically escorted him away, detained him really, he held onto his arm and told him he'd be arrested if it happened again. In fact, the first time this officer even found out what had happened wasn't when he asked. He didn't ask. It was when I told him, and I had to tell him it not only in defence of Simon, but in defence of myself too, because most peculiarly, after escorting Simon back to the van after threatening to arrest him. He then came straight to me and told me it was my fault, apparently, for wandering around, like about 100 other people were doing. Have a listen for yourself.
I know you are, but you're wandering up and round, yeah, and it's antagonising people. Stand still. Real deal.
Stand still? No, I'm a member of the public. I can wander around as much as I want, and all I did was wander from one side to the other, occasionally to get a drink and occasionally to see what the Antifa guys were doing the other end. Thank you to that man in the nice t-shirt, by the way. No, it wasn't me, and the annoying thing is, if this officer had been watching me so intently as he claimed, and he had been, how could he possibly have any reason to think I was antagonising anyone? I know what I did. I wandered back and forth drinking tea and coffee. I barely exchanged more than 10 or 20 words with maybe 2 or 3 people all day. So why is this officer lashing out at me, trying to pin the uninvestigated crime that's just happened on a member of the public who hadn't once spoken to Simon or been anywhere near him and hadn't once spoken to any of the Antifa lefty lot? This really pissed me off. What a cop-out. No pun intended. How this guy has the fucking nerve to firstly threaten to arrest Simon, secondly not investigate the incident properly, thirdly not arrest the offender, and then fourthly, to put the cherry on top, come and tell me it was my fucking fault. On the other hand, where the fuck are the Antifa pricks? Nobody knows. One officer had hold of one of them just a few seconds ago. What happened to him? He somehow mysteriously disappeared. And what about the one Simon was holding onto the scruff of the neck? Again, nobody knows. He disappeared too. Why didn't this highly experienced officer take Simon to one side and ask him what the hell was going on? The answer is, he's biased, in my view. I don't necessarily think he knows he's biased. He's just part of the British police establishment, and he's obviously a very experienced part of it. And if he's a trainer, he's going to be pretty lefty. I can't think of any better way to say it. If he's given the responsibility of training new officers, considering new officers today, well, I'm not even going to go there, but the way they're employed, the way they're trained, the way they're selected now, you can get refused for being white in some forces. It has happened. So I got a pretty good idea where this guy stands on the political spectrum, and things he said later cemented that impression in my mind. He lectured me about how Simon and the rest of Carl's team were inviting this kind of treatment because of what they were wearing. Apparently they don't look very professional. Maybe that's because they are not very professional, as in they're hardly paid fuck all for the difficult job they're doing. No thanks to you for your fucking help. But as everyone watching could see, and quite a few commented, they behave very professionally, considering, well, you can see the budget they've got. They don't have expensive uniforms. They don't have the money for that. And no, they don't have a barrier around their gear, which the officers said they should have if they wanted to look professional. Like, yeah, great, you going to pay for it, pal? I told him exactly what would happen if they tried to erect a barrier. And I know I'm right. Antifa would go and fucking break it. It'd be more cost, more broken equipment, and probably some weapons to fucking fling around. And then he'd be saying, well, I shouldn't have put the barrier there, should they? It's all fucking easy when you're standing there in your uniform and nobody fucks with you, or your 75 mates come and fucking back you up. I actually thought I'd lost the footage of the conversation I had with this officer, but thankfully I found it. This was an hour or two after the incident with Simon, and he'd now seen me talk to Simon once or twice and assumed that I was part of their team, which I wasn't. But I listened to him anyway.
Hey, why don't you next time, instead of having your door type people, have people hive his vest and just get some barriers around here and we won't have any of the problems?
Okay, it's a rhetorical question, as in, he isn't really asking why they don't do that. I know that because I tried to explain the reasons just from the events I witnessed in Truro, but he didn't want to listen to any of it. He just interrupted me right as I was saying they are in a difficult position because...
I mean, they're in a difficult situation because the overwhelming...
barriers, hive his vest, like stewards rather than and then you get treated. I've done it for 26 years.
No, sir, you have not done it for 26 years. Probably not even 26 minutes. What you've done is called policing. You have the entire power of the state behind you. the Crown Prosecution Service, the Home Office, and the Queen is behind every single thing you do in that uniform. So your barrier, your high-vis vest, is not the same as someone else's barrier or high-vis vest. For a start, you have the powers to set up cordons where people are arrestable if they cross them. The general public can't do that, and that's exactly what happens, and I've seen it, when these guys try and set up any kind of flimsy perimeter, even with a bit of tape. People come along, fucking streets, you can't do that, and they're actually right. You can do that, but they don't have to honour them, whereas they do if the police set out a cordon. Obviously, it could be deemed that this officer is just giving some friendly advice, and therefore being supportive, etc. But I was there. I saw his attitude firsthand, and the fact he didn't listen to anything I said, let alone anyone else. I have no doubt he believed what he was saying, and therefore I do believe he was trying to help in some small way. But I also have no doubt whatsoever that he truly believed Simon and co were fully deserving of this kind of treatment and this thankfully isolated incident of violence. I told him about the other attacks that they'd experienced, what I'd witnessed. I mentioned the knife-wielding, threatening gang in Truro, and his expression and language confirmed for me, beyond any doubt, they bring it all on themselves. Because they look like bouncers instead of police officers. Well, what is a bouncer? These guys get cups of tea, they drive a van, they help set up camera equipment, they carry bags, and they keep away violent offenders whenever they can. So I don't see them as bouncers. What's a bouncer look like to you? Just because they're not police officers doesn't make them bouncers. Carl's team did listen to the advice from this officer later on, and they certainly took it on board fully. I overheard it, I wasn't involved in the conversation, but I listened to him giving them advice, and to be honest, I wouldn't have taken as much from it as they did. They were very grateful for it. I saw it as a bit of an empty gesture, to be honest, because of the way he behaved earlier. If he really cared, he could have grabbed hold of everyone and said, what's happened here? Has someone been assaulted? Has a crime happened? He wasn't interested. What he was interested in doing was putting forth his opinion that it's all these guys' fault. They bring it all on themselves. He said it to me. And that played out in his behaviour and his handling, or mishandling of it. I think there was clear undertones of him just disliking them, to be honest, and what they were doing. He's opposed to them. He couldn't disguise it. He tried. He did a good job of disguising it, but he just couldn't do it fully. And I think that absolutely coloured both his view of them and his handling of the incident, which saw Simon get a face full of spit. Something which could have been extremely dangerous. And even if it wasn't, it's not something people are supposed to have to tolerate, especially when there are 10 or more police officers within 30 yards. But again, they ask for it, don't they? A bit later on, when he was talking to one of Carl's team, I overheard this officer saying categorically and quite proudly that the whole event was being monitored. He actually used the word monitored by those cameras up there, he said, as he pointed up at the corner of the building. I looked up and I saw what looked like a camera, and the same thing, there was another one of those on the corner of a building on the other side of the square. So I think there was cameras at least on the corners of 2 buildings, right either side of Carl's event. And I suspect Carl's team make a point of probably seeking out those places to do their events, places that are covered by CCTV for their own protection. I hope they do anyway. So it's all being monitored, we're told, by the officer on the scene, which also means recorded, of course. So again, why did nobody rewind the footage and tell these officers what had just happened to Simon when that scuffle happened? Or why did the officers on the ground not call someone up on the radio and ask them to have a look what had happened? I suppose it'll just have to remain a mystery. Yeah, whatever, Trevor. Going back to this Antifa tosspot, this footage was taken shortly after that officer spoke to me, and was filmed from the very same spot where I was standing, so he was in full view of all the police officers. If they'd wanted to have a chat about what happened earlier, perhaps, but no. This is the guy who shouted the threats earlier. This is the guy who's paired up with the other man who spat at Simon, who was there, and definitely a part of that incident. If you see the other footage, which actually is worth, and he's mentioning this, I've been looking, because after this event, I saw that footage on YouTube. I'm sure it was on more than one person's account, and it was a clear footage taken from someone's phone, but at quite a distance. You could see these two move in, have a go at Simon, try and get to the cameras, try and get into the circle, elbowing everyone out the way. Simon goes and confronts them, and the guy's head goes back and he spits aggressively straight in Simon's face. That video has disappeared. The only place I can find it is on YouTube, but it's been removed. The page is still there, but it says this video has been removed.
accountable.
The American system is completely different. I don't know where to start with him. To be honest, I don't even know where to start with the American system.
I'm not interested in judging the American system. What I'm suggesting, see, now this is your channel.
I don't know who he is.
Yeah, but he's certainly not like this, is he? So you disavow. So you don't disavow. Surely you don't disavow what I'm doing here. Like, yeah, you should take responsibility for this man being inspired by your words and actions. I'm saying don't.
Anyway, this guy is the one who's been here all day. He's the one who the police grabbed in that melee, and who apparently was not even questioned, let alone investigated for his role in what happened. And what is he doing?
I'm just here to tell people about how our surveillance they actually work. It works on a set of keywords. If you search something like, say, firearm or something like that, it gets sent to the nearest military base. Right?
He is taking pictures with his phone and zooming in to get close-ups of the faces of each of Carl's team. He did this for over an hour. I watched him over his shoulder. I could see the pictures he was taking. I could see his phone screen. And it was the entire screen was filled with each face. There were facial photographs of each person on Carl's team. So this is Antifa. They've been violent. They're known for violence. They've already been violent today. They've been threatening. They've been physically disruptive. They're obviously trying to hide their faces. And they're now getting photos of all the faces working around Carl. This is intelligence gathering. It's sinister, and it's why people cannot take this threat lightly anymore. I told the police officer about it. Not as an official report or anything, because I know there's nothing they could do about it, but just to give them a heads up about what they were doing. His response was, happens to us every day of the week, mate. It might happen to one police officer every day somewhere in the UK, I'll give you that. But I doubt most coppers see someone trying to capture close-ups of their face for an hour more than once or twice in a career, if ever. And regardless of that, if it was being done by a group known to commit violence and be anti just about everything, I got a feeling they wouldn't brush it off as nothing.